Hello, hello. In this video, I'll be reviewing the second book in the Gentleman Bastard series, Red Seas Under Red Skies, so the Locke Lamora series, Lies of Locke Lamora series. So, this book, I think the spoiler-free review is it's not as good as the first book in some ways, but it's better in others, and so it really kind of just depends on the way you enjoy stories. So I would say in terms of plot, it's weaker, and it has less sort of, lesser stakes, I guess. There's less kind of going on in terms of, how much we necessarily would care about the action. So plot is weaker and the kind of stakes are lower and it just kind of feels a bit more sort of random, as in, like, it's not like a significant event, it's happening, it's more just kind of like they just happen to be there and they're just kind of doing their thing. So that might sound like I'm criticizing it relative to the first book, but actually I think that this book, the characters are so fantastic and so strong that you kind of watch, at least for myself, you kind of just watch them do anything. And I myself am a very kind of character-focused reader, or listener in this case, because I listen to the audiobooks, but the point being that I listen to read a book for the characters, and I, whatever they're doing, I don't really mind, but I just want to see what they're up to and how they drive the story, and so for me, it's very important that the characters are, that I relate to them in some way, or I care about them, and that they're interesting, and I would say that this book nails that so hard. Our two main characters, Locke and Jean, are just, they're fantastic in their own right. They're, interesting characters that are well developed. We had them built up a bit in the first book, and we get them built up more in the second book via the flashbacks. And they're fantastic characters in their own right. But the way they interact together, kind of strike sparks off each other, both in positive ways for each other. They work well together, they interact, they come up with plans and schemes and, this sort of thing. But they also kind of strike sparks off against each other in negative ways, because, for example, Locke has some shit going on in his past, particularly through his love life, which causes, some of these issues between them. And so I'd say that, like, for me at least, because the characters in this book are so fantastic and we get to know them even more than the first book, I actually preferred this book to the first book. But, that door is creaking. But I can understand how a different reader, so a reader who is more plot-focused and more interested in, kind of seeing what's happening in the story, might perhaps find this book a little bit more vapid. In fact, I think I read a review, so spoilers time now, by the way. Spoilers. But, so at one point in this book, they go out to sea. They literally sent out to sea as to pretend to be pirates to stir up trouble, right? And I think I remember seeing a review where the guy was like, the story gets literally sent out to sea and goes downhill. And so I could definitely see how if you're kind of plot-focused and then, they literally just get sent out to be pirates, you'd be like, I was kind of hoping for a plot and now they're being pirate, what's going on? But for me, I just love whatever they're doing. They're so fun and interesting and they're so competent. Locke especially is such a competent individual. But just seeing him do anything, really, and for me at least, is really fun. So when he gets sent out to become a pirate, I'm like, oh yeah, he's becoming a pirate, cool, I just get to see how he handles that, and of course, because he's so competent, he handles that in a really cool way. But he's not, like, over-competent, he's not, like, ridiculous superhero or anything like that, nothing of the sort. But he is, just a very smart, both IQ and EQ, so to speak. He's smart, he has intelligence, but he's also very smart with people, he's good at manipulating people, and so this allows him to, make the best of his circumstances. So yeah, just getting into some more specifics. This book kind of starts, it starts strong and fun. It kind of starts, they're in a casino. It almost feels like, almost like a James Bond movie type thing. They're like scamming people in a casino, and it's really cool. And so it kind of starts there, and you're already pretty happy. You're kind of seeing, them do something interesting, and you get more and more flashbacks to what their scheme is, what the scheme might be. And then the majority of the story kind of takes place they're kind of being pushed between two. So there's the Archon of Tal Verrar, the city that they're in, who's kind of like the military boss, sort of think like a president kind of thing, like a commander-in-chief sort of dude. And then they're kind of being pushed between him and then the, kind of like the crime boss, the mob boss, of the city who happens to run this casino. So you can kind of think of it as like perhaps an example would be, if you were in a city, it's kind of between the mayor and the mafia boss, in a modern world. But so they kind of push between these two, like back and forth, and the story's really fun, just watching them play these two off each other. And then eventually they also bring in, the kind of like civic rules of a city, which I guess you could say would be the equivalent of like a legislature, if the Archon is a president, then the Priori, which is what they're called, would be the Congress, I guess. But they eventually bring them in as well, so this whole story is just them kind of playing people off each other in order to have the best results for them. But of course it doesn't all go their own way. They get, they get poisoned and forced to do the bidding of the Archon. And so it's quite fun to watch, because the story isn't just, as you can kind of guess with some heist movies and some James Bond style movies, the story isn't just, them dominating the entire time. Rather, it's them, being in a pretty shit situation and using their strengths, intelligence and manipulation, as well as just literal strength in the case of Jean, to really, like, benefit them in their situation. So I think that this story, once again, I would say that the supporting characters are also really fantastic, perhaps better than in the first movie, to be honest. We have, the cool pirate captain, and then her kind of lieutenant that Jean falls in love with. Very quickly, I might add, but it's fine. It's fine. People fall in love quickly. That's all good. And then we have, obviously, like I said, the Archon and the mob boss. And these characters all function very, very well. And they provide sort of interesting kind of backdrops to what Locke and Jean are doing throughout the entire time. And once again, I'd say that this book also really excels with setting. The city is really cool and interesting. Tal Verrar, where they're in originally, and then when they go out to sea, you really kind of get this kind of nautical vibe. They're training to become sailors first of all, and then you just really feel like they are out at sea. Not that I know anything about being out at sea, but I just kind of had that vibe. I could really imagine in my head, they're out on the big ocean, and that was really well developed and interesting. I kind of felt like I was there. You know what I mean? Which is, as a kind of it basically just shows how great Scott Lynch is at eliciting these kind of emotions from you and these kind of feelings from you. I mean, I was just sitting in an office while listening to this, but I felt like I was out in the ocean, so that was really cool. If we want to get into some criticism, one second, I'm overheating. Sorry for the strip show there. If we want to get into some criticisms of the story, I would say that once again it kind of has the same flaw as the first one, where sometimes you feel like people, particularly the people they're kind of manipulating a little bit, sometimes they don't quite act how you think people would. They're a bit overly friendly, a bit overly easily manipulated. Like at one point they're on the boat and their crew has realized that they're fake pirates. They're not real. He's not a real captain. And they kick him off the boat and he's like, oh, well, can I please at least have your survival boat to come with me? And I feel like in real life I'd be like, no, just die. You know what I mean? But for some reason they give him the boat. So I thought that was, like a bit overly optimistic. I mean, like I alluded to earlier, Jean kind of falls deeply in love with this woman, but really, they've only been together for 3 weeks. And to be fair, I can understand that, you can become quite attached to someone in 3 weeks. Absolutely, that's certainly true, and you'd be very, very caught up, even after that short of a period if something happened to him. But he's deeply in love with her, so, I thought that was a little bit rushed, and I feel like it could perhaps have benefited just from maybe even a little time jump. Could have been fun, you just time jump 6 months and then suddenly, being in love with someone is actually pretty legitimate at that point, and lots of people, fall into that category. But yeah, other than those criticisms, I think that... Oh, and the other criticism I have of this book, once again, like the first one, the plot is very borderline non-existent, to be honest. It's basically them kind of doing a heist and getting pulled around and pushed and pulled along the way. But I feel like it's a criticism and it's a strength. Sorry about that door creaking, I should have closed it. But yeah, it's a criticism and it's a strength, because on the one hand, like I said, there's no plot. You don't feel like the story is necessarily going somewhere specific. But on the other hand, it's kind of a different style. It's kind of an original take on storytelling, where often, the plot feels very, obvious and contrived in a lot of stories, and you really feel like that's the only place the story's going to go. And you can probably predict it, you're like, oh yeah, this is a hero's journey. You see the farm boy in the farm, you're like, oh yep, hero's journey, here we go, you know what I mean? And not that there's anything wrong with that, but I feel like, this story kind of takes a different route, where there isn't really necessarily a plot at all. Rather, it's you take some characters, you throw a bunch of conflict at them while they're originally trying to do whatever they were trying to do, and then you just see how they deal with it. Which I think is it's a different kind of take on storytelling, and I think there's nothing wrong with that at all. But, like I say, if you're a plot-focused reader waiting for a story to go somewhere, you might be a little bit surprised when it doesn't really go anywhere. But like I said, I really like the characters. And I feel like I should just kind of had a little section at the end here where I just talk about the vibe of this story. Beyond anything else, beyond... any of the specific things I can bring to, plot, setting, structure, all of this stuff. This story just has, a certain something to it, a certain, I was just so drawn in the entire time. I was literally just listening to this, whenever I could, because I was really, really invested in the story. And, it just kind of had some extra factor pulling me in, which, like I said, I can't necessarily quantify, but I would say that would... I think it's something to do perhaps with like I said, how Scott Lynch kind of elicits these emotions in you and really brings you in. But yeah, so I was super duper invested in the story the entire time. The entire time I was listening to it, I was really in deep, and I feel like that's just an extra factor I should mention. And it was one of those things when I finished the book, I was like, oh my god, I've finished, holy shit, what is the world, But yeah, so I really hope you enjoyed this review, and I would really strongly recommend giving this book and series a listen to. So yeah, have a great rest of your day.